went in correct science that made that phone. Can you have an appreciation for that guy?
Well, the thing is, I don't even have to go for that. That's something I don't even have to think of because I got the phone in my hand. So I don't even have to think about that any further.
Yeah, but if you're just going to, let's say, talking about quantum physics, if you're just going to say, well, they're saying this and they're saying that and they're disagreeing, and therefore I don't have to accept any of it and can discard all of it. Somebody somewhere took the mathematical description of quantum tunneling, saw that this thing with electrons is possible if you put in this kind of a field and that kind of a field, and now the touch screen on your cell phone works. And the touch screen on your cell phone works specifically because of the effect of quantum tunneling.
Okay, now hold on, stop right there. Now let me ask you something. Now, based on what you just said right there, how do you know?
How do I know?
Yes, how do you know that quantum tunneling is the reason my phone works? I mean, personally, I'm talking to you on the phone right now.
Because I work in tech,
My question.
But it is.
You just believe that. Quantum tunneling, you're stating a fact, but you don't really know if that's a fact. You're just assuming that it is.
Know how to,
right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I don't know. We're going to get into the same episode. I'm trying to avoid the same epistemics conversation we had in the last.
So take another angle to it then about personal experience.
Yes,
let's come from
wait.
experience.
Let me answer. Okay. Let me answer his question. Okay. Right.
Fair enough.
So yes, I agree with you on a philosophical sense, on an epistemological sense. I agree with you. It is impossible for a human being to know for a certainty anything at all. And in that sense, I can agree that, yeah, I don't know. It could be just complete random happenstance that we have tried this.
But Bernie, I'm not talking about that. So you're kind of going off on me. I'm not really talking about that. I'm only saying that you may think you know something that you don't. So you're stating of like something as a fact, like you actually know, and you don't. What you know is what you read and you believe it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's a problem because all of the things that I did do agree with that. So I did, let's say, when we talk about transistors, I've built my own transistor from literal metal scrap.
Do you have any experience with quantum tunneling?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
No,
transistors use quantum tunneling. Right?
Okay, no, I didn't ask you what transistors use. I asked you, did you have any personal experience with quantum tunneling?
Yes, he just said he built a transistor.
Yes, right. I'm not talking about transistors. I'm talking about quantum tunneling itself, not the transistor.
That is quantum tunneling. That is getting electricity from one end to the other without it passing in between.
Okay, so why did you say quantum tunneling? Why did you just say you had the
because
reason?
Because that is quantum tunneling.
What I'm saying is, why didn't you just say that the reason I'm able to use my phone is because of transistors?
Because there's other applications of quantum tunneling.
I know, but I'm talking about his experience. He said he has experience with transistors.
Do you know what a transistor is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you have 2 point ends which are not connected, and when you induce a charge on the third end, then electrons jump from one end to the other, right?
Wait a minute. Maybe my hold on. Could you gonna let me answer you?
Thing that I described is
you're not gonna let me. I know, but you got to let me answer you. You asked me a question, and before I can answer, you start answering.
Okay.
Now, maybe my knowledge of transistors is off, but I took electronic technology some years ago, and the basic transistor is where it's at 3 points. You got the 1 point, and if you put amperage at 1 point, you get the same amperage out multiplied. That's the thing I know about a transistor.
Well, no, you have to bias it correctly to. It's basically it's
like an amplifier. In other words, a transistor used as an amplifier. That's what I mean.
It's basically sort of like an on-off switch, but it can be used as an amplifier.
Right. Well, that's what I'm talking about. When you talk about transistors, that's basically my knowledge of transistors.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
how
but
and I understand
you're getting an
logic. I
output based
understand
on the
basic.
bias
Right.
that you put on that
Right.
third leg of the
On that
transistor.
third leg. Yes.
Right. I understand that, and I understand like logic. If then logic chips, CPU. So basic stuff like that. Now, when you start talking about quantum tunneling, that's what I'm asking you. Do you have just this information that we're talking about transistors, or do you have actual experience with quantum tunneling itself?
So with the way you're
It
posing
might
the
be
question,
helpful if he
I
tells us
honestly
what
don't.
experience he would
Yeah,
accept.
precisely.
Both of you guys are talking at once. I can't even hear you.
Can you give us an example of what you would accept as experience with
I'm
quantum
not into
tunneling?
no. There's no such thing as what I would accept. I'm just answering this question. I'm talking about hands
But
on.
he gave you an answer and you said, no, that's not what you meant. So what do you mean?
I mean, I'm talking about what's actual quantum tunneling, not transistors. Transistors are not
Transistors
quantum.
are actual quantum tunneling.
Yes.
So,
Okay,
shall I try and I'll
so
hang on?
then,
I'll come in here.
so that if that's the case, then let's not talk about quantum tunneling. Let's just talk about transistors. Why bring quantum tunneling into it?
But I think
for fuck's
okay.
sake.
So hang on. So I think the point is this, right? Transistors, of course, use quantum tunneling, but there's a difference between me. I've used transistors a lot. I do a lot of electronics, right? I've used chips, but I probably don't have good experience of quantum tunneling because I've not taken, I don't know, electron microscope and looked at the thin slithers or whatever you've got in the transistor to see if there are quantum tunnels there or not. Do you see what I mean? So I've used transistors, which I know use quantum tunneling, but I've not, as such, maybe investigated quantum tunneling itself. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
That was awesome, Tony. I'm glad I recorded that.
Now that
awesome.
was my question to Bernie. Has he experienced quantum tunneling on that level where he's actually done all of those things?
You cannot do those things as he described them. He has a very skewed misunderstanding of what quantum tunneling
Which is fine. Which is absolutely fine. Which is absolutely fine.
Which is absolutely fine.
It was
Hang on,
cool,
I'm still
though.
making the point. I'm still making the point between the difference between real theory and practice, right? I know the theory is in there somewhere and I've not read it yet. And clearly my explanation shows that, right? And I take it on the chin, Barney. I take it on the chin. Yeah.
I didn't mean to offend you in any way.
No, it's fine. I mean,
it's just that
where I'm out of my knowledge, I'm fine. I'm pretty clear on where I am.
Right. When he asked me, have you done that? No, I have not taken an electron microscope and tracked the motion of electrons through the transistor, because that's not how quantum anything works. Because you cannot track a single electron. You can just give out probabilities of where the electron will come to or not based on the...
Tell me this. To make a long story short, tell me this. What actually have you done in the quantum field? Actually.
Used it.
What I have actually done, the experiments that I have performed.
Yes, so in other words, what hands-on in the quantum field have you done? That's what I'm asking.
I have done
the double slit experiment.
I have done this double slit experiment.
Would you let him speak, please?
I have done myself the double slit experiment. I have built a transistor.
Okay, I hear you. Now, what I want to do is clarify. You've done the double slit experiment with what? What tools did you use?
I used 5 millivolt laser, the green one, and aluminum foil, and backplate.
Okay.
Did you get the interference patterns? Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Okay, now, did you do the double slit experiment with the photons?
Yes.
How did you?
Light as photons.
What did you use for photons?
Wait. I just told you 5 millivolt laser.
But that's the beam, isn't that?
The light is photons.
Okay, so you weren't able to shoot out separate photons.
I have not been able to shoot out or detect individual photons, no.
Right. Okay, because that was what my question was. Have you had experience with photons? Okay. So in other words, what you're saying is you understand the interference patterns.
Yes.
Okay. But now, so what does that have to do with my phone?
Does that have to do with your phone?
Right. I mean, in other words, what I'm asking you is that in your experience, from what you've done, what does that have to do with my phone? Like, in other words, what does that have to do with the technology that makes my phone possible?
That wasn't your question. Your question
was
was
my
what
question.
experience did he have with quantum mechanics?
Would you stop trying to? Would you just do me a favor and let him answer instead of
No.
trying to answer for? See, this is the listen. This is the problem I always have with people. When I'm talking to somebody, I keep getting people jumping in from the side instead of the person I'm talking to.
Yes, but I also, like, in talking to you alone, I have the feeling that I'm having 6 different conversations about non-related topics, right? You're asking these questions, and I don't see how they relate to each other.
Right, but I'll get to that. If you keep answering,
let me try and answer the question. The
Sure.
experience that I do have with quantum physics, such as the experiments that I have performed in constructing the transistor, in performing the double slit experiment, all coincide mathematically with the explanations that I'm given. When those explanations are used to then explain the components of the phone that you're holding in your hand, they still work. There is no reason to assume that it works by another method. When you research how these things were developed, when you get into tech and talk to the hardware producers and the software producers, which are private people, which are not government entities, which are people who are in it to make money and make money by they use those same formulas and functions and maths that I have used in my experiments. So
Barney,
wherever I've been able to verify it on 5 different points, on all those points, the story is consistent, and I'm assuming that there are connections in between. Now, you can bring up kind of epistemic uncertainty in, well, maybe those things are not connected at all. Maybe transistors just exist, though if we didn't do the math, we would never have produced the transistor in the first place. So the way we got it was by assuming it was right.
Is that true? Is that actually true? Because I thought they invented transistors.
SLS.
Did the maths come first? Did it?
Somewhat.
Really? Okay. All right.
The first time they noticed that semiconductors can be used to switch on and off the flow of energy was without quantum physics entirely, but to kind of to improve them to the levels that we use today. Yes, it was used. It was done specifically through quantum physics.
It wasn't such a problem when transistors were huge, great, monstrous things in their own individual cans. It becomes an issue when the size of the transistor becomes comes down to 7 nanometers. I mean, you get a feature that's 7 nanometers long.
All right, then quantum effects come into it.
All sorts of quantum effects come into it because you're
so close. Yeah.
I mean, you're at sizes that are much smaller than the wavelength of visible light.
Okay, fair comment. I was just thinking, like, because I seem to remember like having, cat's whisker radio, using a lump of pyrite and managing to sort of pick up a signal, an old AM signal. You know what I mean? Sort of then transistors, cans, and point stuff. But I take the point. Yeah, the improvements did depend on the math.
Wait a minute, I've got a question on this. So, because I was actually going to purchase something today, but I forgot. So AMD have just utterly trounced Intel on releasing their new Ryzen Generation 3, which, spoiler alert, their £250 chip beats Intel's £850 chip. So quite a decent performance cost comparison there, and it's built on 7 nanometer technology on the die. I've never really considered what does that mean. That is on about a capacitor, isn't it?
That is on about any single junction feature.
Yeah.
So if you're saying a problem exists because of the wavelength at 7 nanometers, why aren't we getting that now?
We are.
That's the trouble.
So how have AMD managed to do a 7 nanometer assembly process on the die?
It's not. Well, it is a technical issue of wavelength and light scribing and stuff like that. But what we're talking about is the functionality. That at 7 nanometers, you are getting into that Heisenberg fuzziness of electrons possibly jumping. Like if you have two conductors which are 7 nanometers apart and they're 7 nanometers thick, which is what we're talking about here, you have a real possibility of electrons spontaneously jumping from one to the other, and your conductors and your semiconductors and your transistors no longer functioning as intended. And it's solved by new materials, by making the energy barrier taller, and all of those things are very much based on quantum calculations and how do we make the barrier so rigid that not even quantum tunneling can go through it, and how do we later reduce it to make that transistor work on a scale of a conductor which is 10 atoms wide. Right?
Yeah, and that's why we're getting to the point where they're making quantum computers, but the problem with that is you have to have superconductors, and there is no such thing at this point of a room temperature superconductor. So outside of somebody, correct me if I'm wrong, outside of universities and places like that can afford those cryogenics, quantum computers are cost prohibitive at this point.
Yeah, we got a Q block at work. So my company, which is a big global corporation that I work for, yeah, we've got, as I say, I think it's called a Q block or whatever, in France, in our headquarters. And then we've got emulators, and I never understood how those emulators of quantum computers work. But it's a real area of research, because to do with cryptography, that's why we're researching it. Yeah.
Hey, before you get too far away from me, I keep hearing this term, and can you explain it to me? Why you guys keep saying we? Who is we?
The human race, the civilization we live in.
The things that make things confusing when you start saying we, because it sounds like you're involved personally.
Well, I am.
We all are.
In quantum theory and quantum mechanics?
I'm an electrical engineer, so...
I know, but I didn't say that. I said, are you into quantum mechanics? Like you in a quantum labs and all that?
I was just talking about quantum computing and room temperature superconductor. So yes.
Yes, and Tony just said that they have a Q block at his work, which is a quantum computer. And
okay, so all it takes for you to say we is that you just have to be at a facility that may be doing something.
Well, no, because you can be a consumer of, you can buy a cell phone, and therefore you become part of we because you're putting capital back into that industry. So anybody is we.
But don't you have to understand that you have to be careful when people say that we did this and we did that? Because I don't know if you're talking about you or we the people.
I'm talking. Well, I think you can if you just listen to the context of what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. See, it's very confusing because people interchange these words like they mean something. When I hear somebody
was anybody else confused?
No. Well, it does. I'm not everybody else. I was confused.
Yeah, then ask a clarifying question, and I just answered it.
That's exactly why I did, and I'm still trying to wonder, why do people say we when they had nothing to do with it?
So I guess sometimes people say
it's got nothing to do with it. Do you understand that? I
don't think he does.
Software engineer. In part of my work, I do have to learn and understand how quantum circuitry works. I do have to understand how qubits work, how Deutsches Gate works. What is the relationship of qubits, right? I have to know this stuff to do my job. It's part of my job.
Right, but you're not the scientist itself that's actually in the lab doing it.
There is no scientist in the world that can use that we as you prescribe it. Nobody is a scientist which is inventing quantum physics.
You can't say that there is. There at some point are the actual scientists in the lab. Those are the we's.
Now, where's the line of demarcation between we and not we? in your
The
opinion?
ones that are actually doing it, not the ones that are reading a couple of manuals and just deciding that they're going to include themselves in the conversation.
Those scientists are also reading a couple of manuals, and they're not deciding that. Sorry,
Yes,
I'm getting
but in other words, but they're there. They're actually got the hands on. These are the people that are actually writing these results down. They're writing their findings down. And these findings are the ones that getting published. Those are the we's, not you. So when you say we, it sounds like you're adding yourself in with those people, and you're
I
not. It's
am.
deceiving. So what have you published?
What
Why
have
do
I?
you have to publish?
I'm just asking you, have you published anything?
I have, but
Published my college
not
thesis.
published as in
Listen, I can't talk to both of y'all at once. Barney, have you ever published anything?
published anything in what manner? I have published many things. Yes.
Have you published anything in quantum
No.
theory, mechanics, or whatever? That's
No.
all I'm asking. So there is
No.
no we. So there's no we.
Yes, there is.
You have a very narrow definition of we.
I can have that. There's no problem with that.
Then
Okay.
understand that we
By
cannot
your
have a.
definition of we, I am not we.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
That's
fine.
all I'm saying.
I
That's
think the
only
problem
thing.
that
Okay?
Slick has with it
No, no, no.
is
The thing,
okay.
the thing that's kind of confusing me is why you think that I should take your definition as prescriptively relevant, right?
You don't have to take my position as anything. I'm just explaining to you why I have the position that I have, because people talk about things they think they know and they don't really. They just talk like they do.
So I think the
This
problem
goes back to
Okay.
the conversation we had with the fake navigator earlier, where we had to talk to him for an hour because he was using words that he defined differently than we do, and that just makes it where you can't have a coherent conversation.
So I'll put my finger on the crux of what I think Slick doesn't like, yeah, because I do slightly sympathise with it, right? I think what he means is when people say we, it does sound a bit grandiose, right? Like you're sort of attributing to yourself all of those other things. I don't mean in your two instances, because you are involved with those fields, or even mine, where, you know, I've got a research team who's working in France on these qubits and stuff. Yeah, I've got quite a few people work for me, right? So I think I can use we because it's sort of my business and, well, not all mine, but, you know, shareholders and everything is a big business, right? But I think sometimes people, when say we, like if I started talking about space and I said, well, we've sent rockets to Mars, you know, I've not really got anything to do with rockets going to Mars. Do you sort of mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but I think it's valid to use we in that sense as well. If you mean we, the human race.
oh yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, we. Yeah,
the
agreed.
society,
Well,
we.
Slick, would you take exception with me saying that we won World War II?
Yes, because we won World War II.
I would.
Yeah.
Think about the difference in this statement. You have 3 astronauts, and they say we went to the moon. Now we got a group of people that say we went to the moon. Now,
Yes.
which one of those statements is correct?
Both of them.
No,
Correct.
they're not, because you didn't go anywhere. So now you're discrediting
Human
what
race.
I'm not discrediting
I know,
anything.
but this is the problem when you talk about human race. There are actual people that did something, and there's people that have nothing to do with it. So you can't include all of this we.
Okay.
It's just like the other day when we were talking about 9/11. Brenda said, well, when we investigated, well, what are you talking about? You didn't investigate anything. She said, well, I'm of the United States. Well, I'm of the United States, and I don't feel like we did anything. I was nowhere near that investigation. So it's they. They investigated. There is no we.
But there
I
is
think that's
no-
just an attempt to muddy the waters.
Yeah.
Well, you can call it
And
what you
also-
want.
Wait,
Well,
wait.
if
I'm
those
gonna try
partners
some. I'm
wanted-
gonna try something, Barney. Wait there.
Go ahead.
Slick. We do not agree with you.
That's your problem.
Now, who am I referring to?
It doesn't matter. That's your problem.
Well, we don't care that it is our problem.
Right, and I'm telling you that's your problem.
And I think everybody else on the panel knows exactly who I'm referring to.
I know, but I don't
I do.
care. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it doesn't matter.
Then why are you here? I ask you this every time we talk. Why are you here?
Why don't you stop asking me why I'm here? Why don't you do that?
Because I don't want to.
Don't worry about why I'm here. Worry about why you're here. Don't worry about me.
I worry about why we're here.
We know why we're here.
We.
It is
Now
a bit confusing now. I'm confused.
I can say that we are having a conversation. See, this is the problem. You guys get stuff mixed up. You get so involved in something that you're actually thinks that you're talking facts that you have no idea what you're talking about. But you're so caught up on being so easy to slip yourself in, you just delude yourself.
I think that that you're trying to get us off topic, which was I don't even remember what the original topic was, but to answer your question, there's a lot of things that happen, between engineering and things like that, where someone may not actually put their hands on something, but they were a part of it.
And I disagree with you saying it's easy for me to slip myself in because I had to buy a lot of wine to get that done.
Slick, would it be fair for me to say when someone points at let's say a rocket launch, let's say when they were doing the sat launchers on the Falcon Heavies with SpaceX, would it be fair for me to say we are not capable of such a deception like that in CGI?
If you're asking me, you can't make that statement. When you start saying we about something that you're not involved with personally, I don't care what it is, it's wrong.
What about if I've got the entire knowledge to be able to discern that it is the highest degree of probability of all probabilities that we cannot?
Doesn't matter. If you didn't have anything to do with it, you can't
We're
say
talking
we.
about a hypothetical positive or negative. We can't say anything to do with it. It may or may not have happened, so we can't say that.
Right, but if you're going to give me a hypothetical, you got to give me something that's close to reality.
That is reality. People often look at a Falcon Heavy launch and say, that's all CGI, and I say, we are not capable of that.
Yes, you can't even say that because you can't say what we aren't, or yes, you can, no, because who is we? When you say that we are not.
We is the entire CGI community.
Right, and what I'm trying to ask you is that you are not the entire CGI community.
No.
But he's a member of it.
Yes.
Right, so it doesn't matter. You're still not the entire community. So you can't say we can't. You can say I can't, but you can't say we can't.
No. What about if at the pinnacle of all of the events, it's called SIGGRAPH, yeah? They actually you actually get a chance to talk at SIGGRAPH, and people go there and they give you the latest and greatest in CGI technology over the next 5 years. Sometimes it's 7 years in advance. What about if someone stands up, says we've made a breakthrough, and that breakthrough is still not being able to do this? Is it fair for them to say we can't do this now?
See, like I said, your analogy is not that great. It's just not a great analogy that you're using. If you want to use an analogy like this, let's say that the Falcon Heavy rocket takes off, and then you have a group of people on the side watching and saying, wow, we've made a lot of progress. That's what I'm saying. You can't say that. They made a lot of progress, not we. There is no we.
So you don't class yourself as being part of a human race and a collective?
If I'm talking about we as a human race, but I'm not talking about we as a human race.
Ban has just mentioned that to you and clearly stated that is what he means when he says we. We, the human race, have advanced from the Stone Age to something quite wondrous.
Yes, and we, the computer developers, are working on computer development in quantum physics. And we, as technical engineers, are working on quantum computers. And I do have a part in that. And Dean has a part in CGI and computer graphics. So he can say that narrower we.
Okay, so also the homeless drunk laying on the park bench has a part in it, too. He's a part of the human race.
Yes. Right. Wait a minute.
You are correct on that.
Yeah, wait a minute. So what we're on about now is...
So he can say we, too.
No, wait a minute.
He can.
It can, but it's about the levels. It's about the authority for one to speak on the subject. Then is what you're on about.
Right, but you're claiming your own authority. Nobody can dispute this authority. You're just stating it. You can't back it up, and nobody can back it up.
Oh, I can back it up.
Actually, I have another analogy for you. We'll go back to the rocket. Okay, so the rocket is comprised of multiple different parts. Each of these parts come from many manufacturers. One manufacturer manufactures screws. So the guy that's at the machine that's manufacturing this screw is part of that. He has no clue that screw is actually going to be used on the rocket. But he could use the term we.
Can
He
he
could
claim
use
to
the
be a
term
rocket
we.
scientist? Can that guy that made the screws claim to be a rocket scientist?
No, but he could use the collective we as in we have made this progress.
Why
Right,
would
but
he
Can
have
he
to
not?
be a
I'm talking
rocket
about.
scientist?
See, so you're missing my point. So he can't say that we created rocket science. He can't say
So,
that.
but your problem is that
No,
you're
your
telling
problem. I
Dean.
don't have a problem.
Oh
I
well,
don't
you're
have a
telling
problem.
Dean that he could not say we as in CGI, but you have a problem with somebody
No,
else.
I don't listen. Your problem is saying I have a problem. I don't have a problem.
Oh,
Didn't
see
you just tell
now
us
you're
that we
splitting
had a
hairs.
problem?
You just told us that we
Yeah,
had
I
a
don't have
problem
a
with it.
problem. I don't have a problem. I don't know what you're talking about.
Then
Well, that's
on what
the
basis do you say that we have a problem?
Well, I'm just saying, maybe you have a problem. Why are you just assuming that I'm the one with the problem? Maybe it's you.
well. See now you're getting
Why are
off
you
topic,
assuming that it's
and I'm
us?
still
I'm
going
not
back to the
getting off
topic
topic. I
of.
have to get clarity. When you say I
Okay,
have a
well,
problem, I got to stop you and get some clarity because I'm trying to
sure.
figure how you think I got a problem when maybe you have a problem.
Well, see, your problem is with
So
the
there you go
understanding of
again.
what you're.
Why you keep on
Yeah,
saying my problem?
and
Maybe you have a problem.
because you're interrupting me while
I
we're
know because I'm
talking.
going to
I'm having a
interrupt you. When you
conversation and
tell
I'm
me,
trying
hold
to
on, when
explain
you tell
myself
me
and you keep
my
interrupting me,
problem is, I am going
which
to
is your
interrupt
problem.
you, and I'm
I
not
have
going to
no
let you
problem with
finish because you
continuing to
don't tell
talk
me I
while you
have a
talk.
problem. You don't tell me I have a problem. What do you think you are?
The guy
I'm
that's telling
sorry
you
Yeah,
that you
I
have
said
a
you
problem.
don't
That's
tell
that
what
you
you
me I
have
said.
a
have a
problem
problem. What do you
understanding what
think
I'm
you
trying
are?
to talk to you
Because
about
maybe
while
you
I'm
have a
trying to
problem.
explain to you why you have a
Maybe you
problem.
should start your statement off as, well, maybe my problem is. Why don't you start your statement off like that?
Oh, actually, I have in the
Okay, well,
past,
why don't you
but
do it in
I'm
this
explaining
instance?
to you. I'm
Listen,
explaining to you
sit up
why
there and
I'm
tell me
explaining
your
to you.
problem is. Maybe you got a problem.
See,
Keep it both
now
ways.
you're
Say
just
maybe
talking
your
over just to
problem is,
talk over.
or maybe my problem is. But
I
don't
think
sit up
there's an
there and
anger
try to paint
management
that
problem.
picture. Maybe
I think
my
so too,
problem is
because I was
like
explaining to
you're
you.
incapable of having a problem. What do you think you are?
Oh, I'm capable of having problems just
Okay,
like
well,
anybody
state
else.
that then. Don't tell me,
Now,
listen, when you make a
can I
statement,
finish my
you can make a
explanation before
statement.
you
No, you
continue
can't
talking
do
over me?
anything. You don't tell me I have a problem. Just get those
Hmm.
words out your mouth.
You're still talking over me.
Yes, I
Well, I
am
was
still
trying to have
talking
an
over you. So are
explanation
you going to
to what I
take
was
that back that
explaining.
I have a problem?
Well, see, and you won't let me explain my process here. So what I was saying was, you are telling us that the person that built those screws cannot say we. Am I correct?
I may have accidentally muted Slick.
Oh,
Don't mute me. I don't play that game, StingRay.
it was an accident.
Yeah.
Okay, listen,
Yeah, well,
just
accident this.
just
Because
real
like I
quick,
said, I don't play those games, Sting.
Slick,
Remember, he is prone to
No, because
violence.
that's what
Slick.
you do when you want to
Dean.
silence somebody. Why didn't you mute him?
Yeah, he is. Dean,
See what I'm saying? Why
this
did you
man is
single
prone to
me out to
violence.
mute?
So
I,
be
See,
careful.
I can't stand that
apologize,
shit there.
Slick.
That's just some
I shall mute Sean in the future.
Thank you. Don't play games with
Slick,
me. See, I don't like to be
Slick,
played with.
Yeah, he holds
Slick,
his pistol sideways, Dean.
Slick. Can we get back to this real
Yes,
quick?
did you withdraw that statement?
No, actually, I was
Okay,
asking
well
you a
then don't
question
talk to me. Listen, if you can't withdraw
explain.
that statement, no, if you can't withdraw that statement that my problem is, don't talk to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I don't have to.
Thank you. See, this is the games people play. Talking about my problem is like, what are you talking about? Here. Listen, dude, stop muting me, prick.
Wait a minute, who was that aimed at? Because that can't have been me.
No, I accidentally did it that time.
See, this is where I get pissed off and start fucking calling you a bunch of bitches and motherfuckers. You fucking stupid son of a fucking punk ass bitches.
You know
Fuck
what I'm
you.
saying?
You can't take a
Suck up.
motherfucking conversation. See, anytime.
I Yeah. Okay.
Fucking questions, you start muting that bullshit, you punk ass motherfucking bitches. Fuck you.
So I think what's going on
Fuck
here
you,
is
you
we've
little
got
punk
some.
ass faggot. You ain't
Oh,
having no motherfucking
okay.
conversation here. I'm
This
gonna
is
interrupt the
interesting.